Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining me again. I thought I would now read the article we published earlier today, and today is the 24th of January 2018. It was an op-ed titled "Washington Post Legacy Press Betray Assange as His Freedom Hangs in the Balance." My name is Elizabeth Voss. I am Editor-in-Chief of Disobedient Media, and I want to provide this content to people so that they can listen as opposed to read if they don't have time to read our articles. And I will try to refrain from analysis as I read this. So this is getting right into the article. It says, "The last 2 months have seen tectonic shifts regarding Julian Assange's hope of being able to safely leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London after what is now over 7 years of arbitrary detention. The WikiLeaks editor-in-chief was granted an Ecuadorian passport in December, which conferred on him the right of Ecuadorian citizenship. Potentially even more significant was that Ecuador's move to declassify Assange as a diplomat. WikiLeaks specifically noted Reuters' coverage of these latest developments, saying, Depo Akande, an international law professor at Oxford University, said that Ecuador could argue that Britain had no right under international law to reject its declaration that Assange has diplomatic status. Additional press reports indicate that if the UK were ordered by the International Court to accept Ecuador's decision to treat Assange as a diplomat and were then to declare him a person non grata, it would give him facilities to leave the country unhindered. One hopes that the current Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno will not bow to pressure from the United States to withdraw support from Assange. Ecuador's former president Rafael Correa has indicated that this is a real possibility. So far, Legacy Press has not taken the UK to task for attempting to ignore Assange's new diplomatic role. Now more than ever, the media's silence is important in informing and misinforming the public regarding Assange's situation. The legal implications of Ecuador's decision to confer Assange diplomatic status are potentially massive, but many outlets have been atrociously silent on the matter when they are not outright lying in regards to Assange's circumstances. In light of the precariousness of recent events, human rights activist, journalist, and WikiLeaks supporter Randy Credico recently issued a call for WikiLeaks supporters to mobilize in his support. This is a statement which should be taken seriously by the public and by independent media, which has increasingly been tasked with filling the void left by mainstream outlets that no longer function in the interest of honest reporting." Telesur also reported, that former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa had warned it will only take pressure from the United States to withdraw protection for Assange. He added, "Surely it is already being done, and maybe they await the results of the February 4th referendum to make a decision." Correa also referred to Ecuador's current president as a traitor. Over the past 12 months, Disobedient Media has reported extensively on the hypocrisy of legacy press, including the Washington Post. The outlet's recent coverage of Assange's circumstances serve as an emblem of the overall problem of intelligence agency narratives being pushed by a corporate press with which they are entangled. The Washington Post exemplified the issue when it published an article erroneously titled, quote, "Ecuador's president calls Julian Assange more than a nuisance." The article in question was incorrectly referenced Assange in the following terms. The WikiLeaks founder was wanted in Sweden on sexual assault charges. Those have since been dropped. Assange was never charged with sexual assault, and Sweden ended their investigation into the matter. Although false narratives around WikiLeaks are nothing new for establishment press, the latest smear attempts are particularly important due to the precarious nature of Assange's position. And WikiLeaks Task Force tweeted about that Washington Post article. They said, "The Washington Post falsely reports Ecuador's president saying that Assange is more than a nuisance, when in fact he referred to the issue of Assange's detention by the UK. Then the Washington Post falsely reports that Assange had been charged, then that he didn't show up to court." And if you view the article yourself, you can click on the link to that WikiLeaks tweet and read it yourself. The Washington Post's allusion to non-existent sexual assault charges dishonestly paints Assange and the reasons for his exile in the Ecuadorian embassy in a light that not only is factually untrue, but conveniently distracts from the manifold ways in which Assange and WikiLeaks employees have been directly targeted as a result of their journalistic endeavors. As this author previously reported, there have been a plethora of calls to assassinate Assange from media pundits as well as individuals associated with the Democratic Party establishment, and specifically in that instance I'm referring to Evan Ross, who later was seen hugging Debbie Wasserman Schultz in a public event. In light of all this, it is absurd to discuss Assange's predicament without also addressing the intelligence community and plutocratic establishment that has fundamentally driven the situation from the beginning. The UN rulings on the matter of Assange's detention have stated, quote, Assange has been arbitrarily detained by Sweden and the United Kingdom since his arrest in London on 7th December 2010 as a result of the legal action against him by both governments, the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention said today. I was quoting in that sentence. In essence, even the UN has recognized that Assange's long-standing exile in the Ecuadorian embassy is due to governments who feel threatened by the content of WikiLeaks publications. And then in the article I quoted, I linked to Assange's tweet that says the US and UK governments continue their attempts to arrest him in violation of 2 UN rulings and their own laws. Sweden ceased. At this juncture, it bears reminding that Jeff Bezos, the current owner of the Washington Post, has a $600 million contract with the CIA in relation to his monolithic company, Amazon. The Nation wrote of this situation in 2013. Amazon, under the Post's new owner, Jeff Bezos, recently secured a $600 million contract from the CIA. That's at least twice what Bezos paid for the Post in just this year. Bezos recently disclosed that the company's web services business is building a, quote, private cloud for the CIA to use for its data needs. Critics charge that, at a minimum, the Post needs to disclose its CIA link whenever it reports on the agency. Over 15,000 have signed a petition this week hosted by Roots Action. And that was all a quote from The Nation. The Nation's coverage of the CIA contract with Amazon has since been removed from their webpage for unknown reasons, but is available through archived services. When discussing the Washington Post's exercise in gaslighting, it is important to keep the outlet's well-documented financial connection to the CIA through Bezos in mind. In doing so, it is also pertinent to note that the CIA has made its hatred for Assange very, very clear, especially over the course of the last year. CIA Director Mike Pompeo put the agency's hatred for WikiLeaks on full display as recently as yesterday, when the CIA director lambasted the journalistic organization as a threat on par with Al-Qaeda. Pompeo said of Al-Qaeda and WikiLeaks in the same breath, they don't have a flag at the UN, but they represent real threats to the United States of America. That a group who publishes information that is inconvenient for the CIA would be likened to a terrorist network speaks to the threat which WikiLeaks represents, not to the safety of the American public, but to the plutocratic class of and the American deep state. Pompeo is well known for his previous reference to WikiLeaks as a, quote, non-state hostile intelligence service. The Hill wrote of the incident. In his first major public appearance since taking the top intelligence post in the Trump administration, Pompeo took aim at WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden. The Hill also cited Pompeo's characterization of Assange as a fraud, a coward, hiding behind a screen. Pompeo's vitriolic characterization of WikiLeaks is helpful because it demonstrates that the CIA's response to WikiLeaks is on par with the force with which terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda are pursued. In that light, the magnitude of the threat faced by Assange and WikiLeaks associates cannot be overestimated. Pompeo's words are not only absurd in light of WikiLeaks being an extremely accurate journalistic organization, but also depict the real impetus behind Assange having been trapped in the Ecuadorian embassy for years, which the Washington Post very conveniently just doesn't address. The CIA director's statements, even taken at face value, completely undercut the manipulative coverage of WikiLeaks and Assange by outlets like the Washington Post. Providing evidence of corruption is considered an existential threat by the establishment is indicative of the value of WikiLeaks to the public. The publisher is only a threat to those whose lies are exposed by their publications. The same plutocracy that has aggressively targeted Assange and WikiLeaks has progressively strangled free press and freedom of thought in the United States and the world for decades. The anger of intelligence agencies toward Assange and WikiLeaks may seem superficially unrelated to the disgracefully inaccurate treatment of the publisher in American press. However, it is necessary to view mainstream media coverage of Assange, including both their misinformation and their resounding silence on his having been targeted by the intelligence community, as an expression of aggression from the American deep state. This is especially noteworthy given the close ties of the intelligence community to legacy media, as encapsulated by the Washington Post and its connection to the CIA through Bezos. Disobedient media previously reported on the unanimous echo chamber of establishment political think tanks and apparently left-wing news organizations when it comes to issues pushed by the intelligence community, including the reauthorization of deeply flawed FISA legislation. In the case of Assange, the litany of lies and gaps in coverage over the years are too numerous to recount in full, but represent a concerted effort to silence truth through deflection and manipulation. Alternative media must refuse to be silenced by the American deep state's fanatical crusade against WikiLeaks and its supporters. If it were not for WikiLeaks, the growing niche of independent journalism would have virtually zero factual standing when attempting to counter disinformation by press outlets that have completely abandoned their role as a watchdog against government abuses. If there was ever a time to support WikiLeaks and its editor-in-chief, that time is now. To abandon Assange at this critical moment would be more profound than its deleterious effect on the life of an individual. It would represent a complete forfeiture of integrity across the entire spectrum of journalistic endeavors. And that is the end of that article, and I appreciate you all staying to listen. My name is Elizabeth Voss. You can find me at Elizabeth Lee Voss on Twitter. You can find Disobedient Media on Twitter at Disobedient News. You can also visit our website, and I very much hope you do, at disobedientmedia.com. And you can read through these articles yourself if you have time. And I may be up for one more stream after this, and I hope that my video didn't cut out too horribly this time, but I'm betting it did. As I've said before, I will try to address that issue and the white noise issue and a couple of other issues as soon as I possibly can. I am working on it. Thank you, everyone.